You and I have been talking Trump throughout our program tonight, and certainly Donald Trump commands a lot of attention in this presidential campaign, but the billionaire Republican frontrunner unknowingly displayed his ability to command a couple of non-voters. Take a look at this video, and you might call it doggone crazy.
Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Yeah, you saw with your own eyes how those dogs reacted to what they heard from Donald Trump, and you know what? It's worth a second look.
Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
So if the Donald can do that with the dogs, might he be able to do the same thing in D.C.? Don't kid yourself. Washington, D.C. is not only the seat of our federal government, it's the place where establishment types tend to kick the average American right in the seat. We've mentioned the so-called elites, but you can add to that list cowardly so-called conservatives and a dog whistle media, bound and determined to make Hillary Clinton our first female president. Here's an outrageous claim Hillary made during the most recent Democrat debate.
We also need to make sure that the really discriminatory messages that Trump is sending around the world don't fall on receptive ears. He is becoming ISIS's best recruiter. They are going to people showing videos of Donald Trump insulting Islam and Muslims in order to recruit more radical jihadists.
So now we get the news that Muslim terror group Al-Shabaab included footage of Trump in a recently released video. It's pretty obvious what the terrorists did. They heard Hillary's claim and said to themselves, hey, that's a pretty good idea. So they took her suggestion, and her cheerleaders in the Washington press corps took up her cause, dinging the Donald while lauding Secretary Clinton. ABC News political director Rick Klein went so far as to suggest that Hillary could be forgiven if she said, told you so. Mr. Klein's inane utterance proves two things. First, that he apparently doesn't understand the difference between before and after. And secondly, he's perfectly comfortable having Hillary tell him what to do when it comes to advancing her campaign. You might think there would be a difference between the ABC News political director and the Hillary 2016 political director, but Mr. Klein proves there's no real difference at all. At least that's the way I see it. Now, for the way you see it, your point of view via social media, a whole lot of you are writing in about the remaining Republican candidates. First, we hear from Sandra, who does not like one candidate in particular. She writes, Jeb Bush is so out of touch with GOP voters, it is pathetic. He needs to stop talking. The more I hear him talk, the more angry I become at the GOP Washington, D.C. establishment. Next up, Jimmy, who writes in, I personally love Donald Trump. He does and says what most people are thinking. And finally, it's Steve with another take on the Donald. He writes, Mr. Trump has been called the chaos candidate in a constructive way, and regarding the septic tank Congress, that's what we the people need, a chaotic reshuffling and reconstructing of business as usual. It is good to get back to business as usual. We welcome your comments at newsmaxtv.com/comments. For now, that'll do it. Stay brave, stay free, stay tuned.